The Hong Kong Institute of Chartered Secretaries recently held its 12th biennial Corporate Governance Conference. In the following session, two speakers share their views on how to bring out the best of the board. The first speaker, Mr. Rex Auyeung Pak-kuen, chairman of the MTR Corporation Ltd, shares his views on enhancing positive board dynamics and maximizing the individual and collective capital of the directors in performing their roles and fulfilling their responsibilities.
Thank you very much for having me here today to share my views on this topic, how affirmative dynamics make effective boards. As you can see from the presentation deck, I would like to include the word positive as well, with all the challenges corporations are facing into this volatile and complex world. A positive attitude would help to ensure that board discussions are open, lively, and constructive, all key elements for a high-performing board. The first session this morning, looking at where to find the right people and how to identify individuals joining the new boards and bring them on board. My task now is to look at how you can get the best out of those people, how you can maximize individual and collective capital of the directors to ensure that the board is as effective as possible and supports the execution and achievement of the company's strategic objectives in a way which creates sustainable and long-term value for shareholders and for your broader stakeholders group. This is something that I'm very focused on in my role as chairman of MTR Corporation, and it's not always an easy task. We have 20 board members, and ensuring that each of them can bring the best of themselves to the role, can contribute openly to discussions, and know that the views are being heard, requires the right software, meaning the right culture and tone for myself, and also the right hardware, meaning the right agendas, the right information, the right presentations, from and discussions with the management team. But before I get into my views on affirmative and positive dynamics, let's briefly look at some general principles for effective operations of boards. Firstly, all directors need to know the vision, mission, and value propositions of your organization. As the ultimate stewardship body, the board has a responsibility for establishing and protecting the overarching purpose and fundamental values which govern the activities of the organization, and they should provide a baseline for all discussions in the boardroom. Secondly, directors need to understand their role as a member of the board. We all know that board dynamics differ from those at the management level. The management team is responsible for daily operations and the execution of the agreed strategy. The roles of board members include setting the strategy for the organization, making key decisions on budgets and capital allocation, oversight of the execution of the strategy by management team, and maintaining the effective internal control and risk management framework with the right checks and balances in place. The board needs to be aware of concerns and expectations of the organization's key stakeholders, and is also responsible for recruitment and monitoring of the performance of senior executives. Thirdly, you need to have alignment on expectations. How much time do you expect board members to spend on the role? How often will board meetings be held? And how long will they take? Are board members expected to take up committee roles and training? Having all these agreed upfront will avoid surprises and make it easier to ensure that directors interact and contribute positively at the level expected of them. Fourthly, you need to make sure that you know your boardroom colleagues. Here we are talking about professional rapport in the boardroom. A better relationship with your board colleagues will create a coherent environment in which board members feel comfortable to share opinions without fear of upsetting anyone. At MTR, we hold a chairman's lunch the day before board meetings to allow board members time to interact with each other and with the management team to ask questions on particular proposals in a more informal setting before the formal discussions the following day. And we have found this working really well. Site visits provide further opportunities for board members to get to know each other and build the rapport that is necessary to enable positive dynamics in the boardroom. Ideally, board members are from different sectors with different backgrounds and have different views. We are all aware of and understand the benefits of diversity. But we also have one thing in common: the need to place the best interest of the organizations ahead of our own. After robust discussion and evaluation of proposals from management team, the board will make a decision. And once such decision is made, such decision needs to be supported by all members, despite individual views that may exist and have been discussed. Therefore, a strong partnership with trust and mutual respect among board members is vital. Board members develop mutual respect because they respect one another. They develop trust because they trust one another. They share difficult information because they all have the same reasonably complete information. They can challenge one another's opinion, and a spirited debate becomes a norm. You may be asking what exactly we should do to improve affirmative and positive board dynamics. In my view, we need to consider not only how we structure the work of a board, the hardware, but also how we manage the social system that the board actually is, the software. We need board to be strong, high-functioning work groups whose members trust and challenge one another and engage directly with senior management on critical issues facing their organization, and we cannot achieve this just by looking at procedures. So, starting with the software, to help improve affirmative dynamics during board meetings, we need to validate and value different board members' contributions, be supportive and encourage healthy exchange of opinions. Group thinking can be common at boardroom because it is the easy way out. The chairman has to encourage otherwise. I'm reminded of a story of a recently retired CEO who was invited to join the board of a corporation that is suffering from great distress. He was told, as a matter of custom, new directors were expected to say nothing for the first 12 months. Of course, the candidate said, "Fine, I'll see you in a year." And of course, never got the appointment. The ability to dip into a talent pool of diverse individuals is critical to help avoid group thinking, because diverse members contribute different insights and skills that can help to improve the function of the board. A board consisting of a homogeneous group of individuals would not produce the most effective strategy and decisions for the company. We need people with different executive business experience, professional training, legal, finance, audit, or even with different cultural backgrounds in order to cover a wider spectrum of opinions. Even more important than diversity, though, is inclusion. The wider the spectrum of different views, the greater the challenges may be in communication and reaching consensus between board members, and so all need to feel encouraged and comfortable to speak up. To foster positive dynamics, board members must express the different opinions in a constructive way. A clear understanding of the organization's vision, mission, and values is fundamental and far easier for your opinion to be considered as constructive if you share it, having carefully prepared with useful information, relevant facts, and assessments. Despite our best efforts, we still need to get prepared for conflicts in the boardroom. Can and should conflicts be avoided? The short answer is no. In fact, a more diverse board may increase friction between members, but conflicts can be managed properly. Here are some of my tips. 1, stay calm and listen actively. 2, make sure the disputing member feels his or her opinion is being heard. And 3, recognize others' positive ideas to ensure continued participation. It is critical to preserve trust and mutual respect when there are disagreements. And now, onto the hardware. As chairman, I have a range of tools at hand to improve boardroom dynamics, the structure of the board, the setting of board agendas, the papers and presentation made to the board, information flows, site visits, and the conduct of the meetings themselves. But I cannot do this alone. The senior management team is obviously a critical player, especially when it comes to the timeliness and adequacy of the reporting to the board. The business environment is changing fast, and the board has to be up to date and have the right information in front of it to enable the board to make informed decisions, particularly on difficult issues. The company secretary, of course, is my ally in this as well. Early discussions around board agenda, clear papers and presentations, a well-organized orientation program, and regular updates can help keep board members in the loop and ensure that the right discussions are held in a positive manner and at the right time. One final point on hardware is the importance of evaluation. Some jurisdictions mandate regular board evaluations, both internal and external, and I feel that we are a bit lagging behind in Hong Kong. Psychologists and organizational learning experts agree that people and organizations cannot learn without feedback. No matter how good a board is, it's bound to get better if it is reviewed intelligently. At MTR, the board has just agreed on a revised strategic direction for the company, and my next step is to carry out a board evaluation exercise through the lens of the new strategy. Do we have the right people on our board to support the execution of the strategy? Do we have the right committees in place to oversee the different elements of this strategy? And are those committees receiving the right information? We are just embarking on this exercise, and I'm confident that it will further enhance our boardroom dynamics and make them even more effective. So far, I have touched on some general principles for effective boards, giving you my views as to why affirmative and positive dynamics in boardrooms are so important, and share some thoughts on the key software and hardware elements of affirmative and positive dynamics. Hopefully, some ideas to stimulate your thought process to be more forward-thinking. One thing we know for sure, that corporate governance cannot stand still. Businesses are constantly changing, moving into new business lines or into new locations. The regulatory environment continues to develop. The expectations of different stakeholders are only increasing, and external shocks, such as the outbreak of COVID-19 and the emergence of new technologies, seems to be happening more and more regularly. We should therefore all ask ourselves the question, how can board members cope with the new normal, and how can affirmative dynamics help board members cope? In the past 6 months, most of you must have been busy responding to the crisis on the unprecedented market conditions caused by COVID-19. For example, your company may have needed to provide a safe and clean work environment for your staff, or you may have needed to provide resources for your staff to effectively work from home. Or even worse, your corporation may have had cash flow problems. A lot of challenges that require your immediate attention and action. But if you are a board member, you have a much tougher task. The board needs to balance the immediate need of the business with long-term ambitions, and the true color of an effective and high-performing board is how it can work together with management to address the short-term challenges while maintaining a focus on the longer-term strategy. Good governance guidelines are very important and will help, but they are not the whole story. If a board is to truly fulfill its mission, it must become a robust team, one whose members know how to discover the truth, willing to share opinion, to challenge one another positively, and to maintain a spirit of mutual respect and trust. In closing, when I watch a football game on weekends, I see players arguing with their teammates, but I know they're all going for the same mission, which is to win the game. Thank you very much for your attention.
The second speaker, Ms. Edith Shih, Executive Director and Company Secretary of CK Hutchison Holdings Ltd, shares her personal experience on organizing, conducting, and attending an effective and productive board meeting.
The Bible of board meetings is normally not for the chairperson, but probably the company secretary and some executive directors. The Bible lists down information which should be at the fingertips of all governance professionals to ensure smooth and efficient running of board meetings. First, the legal parameters within which the company operates, including the laws, the listing rules for listed companies, constitutional documents, these are our M&As, currently probably more articles only or bylaws, and sometimes shareholders' agreements. And these govern the meeting protocol and validity of meetings. Secondly, board members, their contact details, including, very importantly, home and mobile numbers, because whenever you need them, they are not in their office, it's in the middle of the night. And make sure you have that information handy with you on your mobile device. We should also know the category of directorship, whether they are executive directors, non-executive, or independent non-executive, and then also their committee membership. The quorum of meetings is important to know to ensure meeting validity. I have come across quorums of 2, which is really the common number, but little did we know, in one of our companies, it is 3. We almost blew the meeting. And there are those that would require 10, and for shareholders' meetings, the number could be a lot more. My church members' meeting requires 100 members to be present. And in this COVID-19 situation, it is going to be a tall order. As a result of the global nature of our boards, we might need to watch out for time zones where the directors reside. The Thought Leadership Committee of the Chartered Governance Institute, of which Peter chairs, comprises members residing across 8 cities and several time zones, stretching from 6 a.m. in Toronto to 11 p.m. in New Zealand. Fortunately, Hong Kong is in the middle, is about 7 p.m., and Peter, the chair, is probably about 12 noon. Well, in my group's biopharmaceutical company, the optimal start time for a board meeting is 9 p.m. in Hong Kong, 9 a.m. in Boston, 6 a.m. in Seattle, 1 p.m. in London, and 6 p.m. in Tel Aviv. As for the board meeting themselves, what notice formalities are there? Hong Kong listed companies require 14 days. And the agenda is not just the responsibility of the company secretary and sometimes the chairman. All directors and senior executives have to be involved. Finally, in our Bible, we should know ourselves what are the resolution approving thresholds. Generally, simple majority other than for specifically specified matters. As for written resolutions, the more older forms of articles would provide for unanimous approval. However, with global traveling being so common and directors residing in different time zones, unanimous approval is a tall order, especially when there is a very tight time limit. Say overnight determination is required. At CK Hutchison, we have a provision that if you're not in town, your vote doesn't have to be counted. But I make sure that everybody is aware, and in as much as possible, I would put in their positive vote. Let's look at the preparation of board meetings. First, the agenda. I always review the minutes of the previous meeting to ensure that all matters arising have been attended to, with appropriate executives assigned for handling and following up. The setting up of the meeting would also entail taking into consideration the time it takes for directors to travel to the meeting venue or country, that is for physical meetings, and then different time zones for video and audio conference meetings. Where multiple venues are involved, site visits might have to be conducted, and often IT support in-house and sometimes external service provider would have to be involved. Our recent board meeting, held in conjunction with our AGM, involved coordinating directors at the physical hotel venue and from our offices and from offices of individual directors locally and abroad. Board paper collation and dispatch is an essential part of board meetings. We knew that many of our companies are already using a portal. These papers could be uploaded and kept intact for efficient delivery, reading, and management. We come to the board meeting proper. I always send a reminder, written reminder, to be followed by a telephone call. But normally the telephone call doesn't get to the director, it stops at the secretary. So it depends on how effective the secretary is. Now, and yet, with that reminder, we still come across directors that get the date wrong, that get the venue wrong, or actually have fallen asleep because it's 3 a.m. where he is. So one time, some 10, 12 years ago, one of our directors misread the start time of the meeting, and he was 15 minutes late. So by the time he was tracked down at the Peninsula Hotel, he was actually late for the meeting. Instead of riding in the famous Peninsula Green Rolls Royce, he rushed over to our office on the Hong Kong side in torrential rain, taking the MTR. Very smart. I know how seriously he takes attendance at board meetings and was perplexed to see as to how to help him. Suddenly, ding, the light bulb goes on. I reach out to my mobile phone and call him on his mobile. He ended up attending the board meeting on his way in the MTR, and he actually managed to arrive before the meeting ends. He was very pleased. We all know who this person is, right? We have already covered equipment, so I am going to just skip it. And timekeeping is very important, so a guideline as to which how many minutes per item should last would be very useful. Surprises, there are always surprises at meetings, and I have an in-net who is very diligent, and he would read, especially when we have our results announcement, read every line and he would give me his comments. But unfortunately, at the board meeting, and the results announcement has to be released, say, within 15 minutes after the board meeting. So I end up having a big problem at my hand. So I started to call him 1 or 2 days before the meeting so he could give me all his comments. And now he beats me to it. He calls me before I call him. Difficult board meetings, we would normally provide an executive summary or a legal report so that there is some form of understanding for the director. Pre-meeting briefing, we just had a poll, and actually quite a lot of companies do that. And this is really for those items that are not self-explanatory, possibly because we are announcing annual results, or when there are complicated matters to be dealt with. And subsequently, we might have to come up with supplemental papers. And I'd just like to quickly cover a very difficult meeting that I have handled. This is it's in last century, in 1999, when Hutchison sold Orange PLC to Mannesmann and then to Vodafone. The Orange board was engaged in extensive and extended board meetings to consider the transaction. The marathon meeting took more than a week to conclude. Not only were there extremely difficult commercial and legal issues to resolve, such as employee retention incentive and regulatory approval, the deliberation was not helped by some of the directors traveling in different time zones and having difficulty connecting into meetings. Throughout the process, everyone worked around the clock to iron out differences, coming up with new proposals and finding time slots for meetings to be held, slowly convincing uncooperative directors and finally achieving unanimous board approval. Very often, solutions were found over discussions during coffee break, working lunch, or even in the washroom. The transaction at the time was the deal of the century, with a profit level of Hong Kong dollars 118 billion, US dollars 15 billion. It would not be a comforting scenario even if only one director was not supportive of the transaction. I'm going to skip over this because we all know we sometimes have to be making announcements and filings after the board meeting. And the most difficult thing is the minutes, because we are often procrastinators. We look at the notes that we have taken, we look at the time, I'll do it tomorrow. There's always a tomorrow, but actually if you do it today, whether you do it today or tomorrow, you still have to do it, so you might as well do it earlier. So everybody's memory about the meeting is fresh. The last two slides, are you ever pressured into signing a contract before securing approval of the board? Knowing that the board members would not find the transaction objectionable. Would you do that? Never. As we are trusted as gatekeepers of the company or institution we're associated with, this is a line that we should never cross, no matter how efficient we want to be and how we don't want to waste directors' time. Not a substitute for good governance. Thank you very much.